And we are live, so welcome to Psyfeld. This morning we're going to be discussing the wife. So where are we starting?
George.
George. All right, George Costanza. So I was talking about gyms.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on with Mr. Costanza?
George pees in the shower because he's still not photo trained.
Very Freudian.
Yeah. And he then proceeds to have this long process of trying to not get suspended from the gym because the guy that Elaine thinks is interested in her catches him peeing in the shower. And he's just bleeding for her injury. But it really all stems from the fact that he literally can't hold it even until he finishes showering, or he can't be bothered to stop showering and walk to the toilet and then come back to the shower.
So with our Freudian hat on, formulating this, and what etiology would that play in George's adult behavior? So when George toilet trained, did it go positive or negative?
Negative.
Did it go negative, anal retentive, where the individual then basically restricts, or was it anal expulsive in that it's the opposite? Anal expulsive, right? And is that consistent with George's adult behavior? So in this case, he's a Freudian dream. This is textbook. Whether we use this or not on the CL service, or whether it comes up on your shelf exam is another question, but this does review basic Freudian theory with regard to toilet training. Freud's second stage of psychosexual development, right, which is about the age of 2. This corresponds to the Ericksonian stage of what? Autonomy. And if the individual does not toilet train correctly, and if they don't reach autonomy, then they experience shame and doubt. That's Erickson's second stage of psychosocial development. Okay? So along these lines, we have George really being the opposite of your obsessive compulsive personality, which is what? We kind of jump-started this conversation yesterday by just introducing the personality disorder. So what is the obsessive compulsive personality? And the reason, I'm going to put words right in your mouth right now. The reason there is mass hesitation here is because that there is no diagnostic criteria listed in the DSM that includes the words obsessive or compulsive anywhere in the definition of the obsessive compulsive personality. It is a misnomer, and it serves to confuse. That's the reason why you're looking at me the way you're looking at me this morning. Right? It's way too early in the week to have these glazed over looks. Right? That's the obsessive compulsive personality. Anytime you see this, that is the label, whether it comes up in a vignette, on your shelf exam or otherwise, I want you to switch the name, because as soon as you rename this, then you fully understand what the obsessive compulsive personality is. What name is best to give it? Type A personality, and the other one is the anal retentive personality disorder. I mean, either one, right? This is your type A personality. Question, which one trait within the type A personality is the best predictor of future coronary artery disease? Hostility comes up in exams all the time. Hostility as the marker. It's a favorite exam question. So that's your obsessive compulsive personality. How does this differ from the obsessive compulsive personality? The personality formerly in the anxiety disorders chapter, now part of the anxiety spectrum disorders in the DSM-5. That's true. That's true, but that's like saying, or answering the question, the difference between the Empire State Building and an ant is that they're different colors. And they are, but there's probably a much more important aspect that differentiates these two. And I know your review books say this because 95% of the time that's the answer medical students do. Exactly right. Right. Obsessive compulsive disorder is literally defined by obsessions and/or compulsions. If you ever hesitate to remember the DSM criteria, simply look in the title. The exact opposite is true for the obsessive compulsive personality, right? Because there is no obsessions and there is no compulsions with regard to the definition of the DSM. It's a misnomer, direct opposite. One is your type A personality, and the other is an anxiety disorder that is characterized by obsessions and or compulsions. And that's really what differentiates it. It's because of that that one is egosyntonic and one is the other one is egodystonic. But don't miss the big picture here. One more final question. If that's the case, why in the world do they share a similar name? I mean, the biggest reason, of course, is that it confuses and confounds medical students, which is awesome, which beats a goal. But what's the real reason why they share a common name when they really have quite different definitions? That's the etiology. They share the common defense mechanism of isolation of affect. So again, Freudian psychodynamic theory is the reason why they actually have similar sounding names. All right, so George, urinating in the shower. It gets to underlying dynamic, if not Freudian, with regard to motivating adult behavior. Any other characters here? Elaine, what's going on with Elaine?
She thinks this guy is into her to the point where she's like, oh, he left sweat on the machine, and this must mean that he wants to be close to me. So there's that.
There's that. You're exactly right. There is that. What is that?
Delusional disorder.
I don't disagree. What particular type of delusion?
I don't know.
So the theme is erotomania, okay? And if you're going to actually relabel the name of the delusion, erotomanic type is true, but does this delusion have a specific name where there is an actual real stimulus that an individual imparts a delusional idea to? Because nobody here has any problem believing that there is sweat left on the machine. But her personalized interpretation of that sweat is the delusional part of the process. What is that called? It's called an idea of reference, otherwise known as a delusional misperception. Right? It's the misperception of the real stimulus. The stimulus is there, right? I mean, there's no reason to doubt that there's sweat left on the machine, but the highly personalized significance that Elaine imparts to it is delusional. Idea reference, the type, likely erotomanic. What are the other types of delusional themes? And these are the subtypes of delusional disorder. Grandiosity or grandiose?
Persecution.
Persecution or persecutory?
Somatic.
Somatic?
Jealous.
And jealous, good. If not one of those five, what is the grab bag? Is that it?
Unspecified.
Unspecified. Okay, now the unspecified disorders we had talked about before sometimes go by specific names. What are some of these? Capgras. What's Capgras?
Capgras. I think it's like, yeah, it's where everyone, is that the imposter? Like everyone is.
The body snatcher syndrome. You believe usually a close relative or loved one has been taken over by an imposter. Right. Another example. Frigoli. What's Frigoli?
Shapeshifting.
Shape-shifting syndrome. Right. You believe that one individual can shapeshift and take different forms. What movie? Matrix. The agents in the Matrix. Movie for Capgras, other than the invasion of the body snatchers, which is pretty straightforward. It's actually the title. The Thing. Great. It's Harry Potter. Don't know about that. Are you guys, quick tangent, are you guys playing Quidditch?
We sure are.
Yeah, we are. I just want to make sure you guys are on board with that. I kind of missed this, but the houses are actually comprised of the different sites for the most part. So I didn't know I should have more kind of loyalty to this particular group of students and you guys winning. So
We're split in half, though.
yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm not looking at any one person in particular and saying, go out and win now, win, Rocky, win. But yeah, there's some pride, so. All right, any other examples of, one more big time
It's
example?
all we can do.
It's the
No, that's in the same chapter. So delusional disorders is one example in the psychotic disorders chapter. Folia do is another example of a psychotic disorder.
I forgot what it's called, but it's where you believe that a part of your body is not yours.
Cotard.
Yeah, Cotard's.
Right. But that's a guitar syndrome movie.
Evil Dead.
Wizard of Oz. Evil
The
Dead.
hand.
Yes. I'm giving you that. Where's that funny? It's an awesome scene.
You're laughing.
Well. All right. Any other characters here worth discussing? So Elaine, in her behavior, with regard to her behavior at the gym, I think allows a very good prompt to discuss the psychotic disorders in general, in the delusional disorders in particular. Other characters? What's going on with Jerry this particular episode?
He's dating Courtney Cox. I think her name's Meryl. And he finds a locket in his jacket, and the locket belongs to his dry cleaner. And so he brings it to him, and he, as an expression of gratitude, the dry cleaner gives him 25% off for him and his family. And he's with his girlfriend Meryl, and she's like, "Oh well, I'm his wife, so I get to discount too." So then it's like them being married, and at first they both really enjoy it, and then by the end they get like divorced. And there's
So-
also something about pancakes.
I want to talk about that for a second. There's a loose association there. But before we get to that, any parallel here with regard to some particular illness in psychiatry or syndrome in psychiatry?
Like a loose parallel would be Meryl, like histrionic, being like, "Oh, this is an amazing relationship, even though they haven't been together that long." But when they break up, she's not like threatening to hurt herself.
So she's overvaluing something, and maybe even having an intense relationship is certainly something consistent with the cluster B personality. Yep. How about her and Jerry, for that matter, actually faking something for external incentive? Yeah, that's parallel to malingering as well. We'll always have pancakes. Anybody Google that term? No? We'll always have Paris. That ring a bell? Casablanca. Now, I'm not going to start a discussion this morning on Casablanca. Very hesitant to start discussions on movies previous to 1980. However, having said that, there is a line a little bit later in the movie, Round Up the Usual Suspects, which is a nice loose association to a film that's more contemporary, that certainly has major psychological and psychiatric themes. Right? Does anybody here watch The Usual Suspects? Right. And what single best diagnosis do we have for Kaiser Soze? Other than antisocial personality disorder, obviously. What's the reveal? Spoiler alert. Very last scene, what happens? Very last, literally last scene.
He makes up the story based on everything in the room, but I can't remember what it's called. He uses like everything on the bulletin board to essentially come up with the entire thing.
And he's walking down the block with the detective, realizing that chasing after him.
He stops lifting.
Stops on things. A single best diagnosis. So we actually get back to the same exact diagnosis that jump-started this discussion through a loose association. Kaiser Soze is a malingerer, among other things. Any other characters here? We're talking about the wife, season 5, episode 18, Seinfeld. Any other thoughts, observations? What's wrong with Kramer in this episode?
Yeah.
So prompts an easy discussion of insomnia. The quick algorithm for insomnia, because this will be a very common chief complaint, not only seen during your psychiatry rotation, but just as importantly, perhaps more importantly, in your future career, especially your non-psychiatric career, is number one, I would always in a clinical setting, always attribute insomnia to a larger mental disorder. This is going to feel a little uncomfortable because we're always told in psychiatry, do not think about the mental disorder before you think about both an underlying substance use disorder and or the direct effects of a medical condition. The reason why I say think of a mental disorder is twofold. Number one is, by thinking of the mental disorder, implicit in that is that you must rule out substance and GMC. So while I say mental disorder should be your first step, really the first two steps are implicit in that already. If your patient rules in for a particular mental disorder and you believe that their insomnia is severe enough to warrant independent clinical attention, you can make two diagnoses. Okay? If not, obviously, then you treat the overriding disorder, whether it's a primary mood disorder like depression or primary anxiety disorder like generalized anxiety disorder or PTSD. That's the bottom line, okay? If you can't find a mental disorder, well, that means you can't find a medical condition and or a substance that is also inducing the insomnia, because that's a 3-in-1. And then once you've ruled those out, again, 3-in-1, then you get to the sleep disorders. And at that point, you're discussing parasomnias versus insomnias. Okay? And just to kind of pick up on what you had said earlier, the movie to discuss is The Thing. That's a wonderful movie to just remember the different parasomnias and dysomnias. We can talk about that in more detail at a later date. If there is no evident parasomnia or dysomnia, and in this case, you may have also consulted a sleep lab, so a polysomnography may be part of that actual diagnostic approach. But if after the workup you find nothing, then you have primary insomnia, which is basically saying, yes, your patient can't sleep. Yes, it is clinically significant, but I can't attribute it to either a mental disorder, the direct and physiologic effects of a substance, or another medical condition, or another sleep disorder. Right? So when that four-step approach has been evaluated and completed, now you're just dealing with primary insomnia or primary hypersomnia. Right? So there's the algorithm. I think if done in that way for every patient, you're going to take a very common and a very complex problem and in a clinical setting approach it, I think, in a diagnostic way that makes sense. All right, so any questions about insomnia or Kramer? Any questions or thoughts about any other character in last night's episode, The Wife? And I'll stop there. We'll come back at 12:30. We're going to discuss what?
Ring
Saw
Hospital.
The Ring Saw Hospital. We have a wonderful lunch ahead of us. All right, so have a great morning rounds. We'll see you back here on Periscope at 12:30.